obnoxious. Dr. Diaz, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yes, that's fine. Steve Diaz.
Okay, got it. And what's the appropriate title for you?
It is Dr. Diaz. I go by Steve as well. Steve is fine with me as well.
Oh, sure, but Chief Medical Officer, right?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm the Chief Medical Officer for MaineGeneral Health.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Diaz, I guess where I should start is just by we do this verify segment to make sure that we kind of combat all the misinformation that's out there about well, in this case, it happens to be the COVID-19 vaccines, but our verify brand really applies to anything. We had one the other day about, is Social Security going to run out in 12 years? So anyway, but it's not. but there's a lot of stuff, as I'm sure you've seen and probably heard online, and then just circulating from people about misinformation about the COVID-19 vaccine. Is there one in particular that either sticks out to you from either patients or friends and family or co-workers, staff that you hear a lot?
Yes, well, there's a few. I think the major thread is that this is the first large-scale production of mRNA vaccines. And so how do we know it's safe? It's so new. That's probably the number one. And I would say it's not as new as you think. mRNA technology to get mRNA into cells has been around since 1978. And in the 21st century, early 2000s, they started looking at it for other vaccines. It had been used in mice in 1990s. Then they started looking at humans, and they actually ran down the path of Ebola and rabies vaccines with mRNA. And they never got very far, who knows the different reasons. But then when the global pandemic hit, they were well positioned to take this technology, which has been around for decades, pivot and move the timeline for production into months rather than the typical 4 to 7 years. So in many ways, we were very fortunate, but it's not brand spanking new. It's been well tested for decades, and it kind of then hinges. The next thing I hear is that it's experimental. Yes, experiments were conducted to get to where we are today, but when the FDA issues emergency use authorization, it's gone through all the appropriate steps to verify that it works, that it has a safety profile, that it's going to be continuously, it's in all the things that other medications and vaccines go through, no differently, that we do not call experimental. So no, it's not experimental. It's not brand spanking new. The scale is, and it's not experimental. Those are probably the two biggest things that people throw into the conversation that makes it very difficult to then talk about the value of vaccination.
Can you explain why that's so difficult to have those discussions with people who have those beliefs?
I think the difficulty is that for the last 19 months, our national communication has been fragmented. I think there's been very smart people with perhaps good intentions whose message either didn't align completely or didn't align at all. And I think that causes distrust. And so when you look at who people go to, by and large, it's largely been their primary care physicians or other healthcare professionals they trust. And even amongst those factions, sometimes there's not exact alignment. But when it starts out that the big message is muddled, I think it's very hard then for people to know that what we're saying is in fact the science of the day and not someone's opinion of what should be. So that's why it's so hard. We haven't had a consistent national message. So the one-on-one discussions become much more difficult, as people can then say, well, I read on this blog or I saw on Facebook. So it's pulling them back is very difficult once that is set in.
Well, one thing I wanted to make sure that I understand before I do any more reporting on this, because we've talked about the technology of an mRNA vaccine has been studied, right, by researchers, as you said, since the 70s. Has it ever been produced in a vaccine before to combat like another respiratory virus?
So in the late 1990s, I believe, it was actually used to create vaccines for mice. They made some test mice, and so in the 70s, what they developed was the ability to use mRNA the way you wanted. And what they wanted to do was take mRNA and deliver it into a cell overtly. So that's what was discovered in the 70s and 80s. In the 90s, they then were able to take that mechanism and create a vaccine. mRNA is different than other vaccines. Other vaccines have been around for hundreds of years. We take something that hurts us, we take it either from ourselves or from other animals like us. We denature it, is that we partly destroy it some way, either with chemicals or heat. And then once it's no longer really active, these are the early ones, we give it to a lot of people so they get a partial immune response, so they don't get so sick or die from whatever the disease is. So your body is seeing parts of an infection to create an immune response. mRNA actually takes part of the material of the infecting agent and goes into your cells and creates the proteins to help fight it. They're not tricking the cells, the immune cells, to work by showing them the threat. They're taking over the machinery to produce the things that you need to fight the threat. Very different concept. And so when they did it in the mice, and then they started looking at it for Ebola and rabies, I know some large companies spun up to do it. I don't know where they went as far as how far they were ready to go live. Many of these, I think, biochemical endeavors, I don't think are as well funded as things, as other things. And so that's probably what happened. They ran out of the capital to pursue that for whatever reason. But I think when something happens to which there's a large demand, such as COVID-19, they're able to take that same mechanism and technology and then find a way forward with a business plan as well as a ethical obligation to provide the material.
Got it. This is something also that's kind of come up before, and I know our public health leaders have addressed this, but I wanted to ask you as well, that the concept of the emergency use authorization means that a vaccine manufacturer was allowed to either skip certain portions of research trials, clinical trials, or skip the animal testing or anything like that. Can you just help me understand? I mean, is that what an EUA allows for?
It is not. An EUA allows you to go forward with authorization, and it is full authorization. It's not full approval. It's full authorization that someone has passed each step along the way. You are not allowed to skip any steps, and that each step was successful, and that the committee that convenes to make sure that the risk is less than the benefit meets all those tenets. There is still ongoing data being recovered, and there's a different level for full approval where you have to have data coming back to you in certain population numbers, certain demographics, all the, many more check boxes than getting to the emergency use authorization area. But emergency use authorization does not allow any step to be skipped, not fulfilled, or any any subjective discrimination to occur to say, well, it looks okay. It is the same process as with anything else. It's the step before the FDA is ready to review for full approval. It gives the companies a chance to complete the packet that they have to complete anyway for the process, yet it allows us to use the medication or vaccination in an appropriate fashion. And in this case, for this global pandemic, it was exactly the right call.
There are a lot of people who have, actually, before I move on, so it is, it would be false to say that an EUA authorization, sorry, that's redundant, but an EUA does not mean that a vaccine is experimental. That would be, it would be false to say that an EUA means that the vaccine is experimental.
That is a false statement, correct. It is not experimental as an EUA.
Got it. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to ask you too is, and I know this has kind of come up a lot, is concerns about the long-term side effects. Other doctors that I've spoken to have said, generally with vaccines and with these ones, we would have seen any type of long-term effects roughly around 6 to 8 weeks following the administration of a dose. Can you explain, one, is that true, and two, how that works?
Yes, so most vaccine-related issues are really in the immediate post-vaccination area of us reacting to something in the vaccine and having an allergic response or something like that. The vaccine triggers your immune system to do something that's readily apparent and correct. 6 to 8 weeks is usually the longest that it takes to figure that out. The long-term effects of vaccination is an interesting concept, especially in COVID. So people are concerned that there are some COVID infections that lead to chronic conditions which may stay with you for a long time, kidney damage, lung damage, etc. If you're weighing the scales of risk and benefit, being vaccinated and having the minimal number of events we've seen over the hundreds of millions of doses given is much less than people who are unvaccinated and get COVID and have long COVID syndrome, which has been dubbed, or other issues where the COVID infection has accelerated or created new issues for you, either in your neurologic system, your heart, your lungs, your kidney. So in many ways, I mean, I know I'm not answering your question directly, but the first step is that COVID infection creates many more long-term issues for those who have it than the vaccine has, as we know today. So even today, we know those numbers are completely in favor of vaccination to mitigate long-term chronic health conditions. As far as the vaccine on its own for long-term outcomes, I think this again comes from misinformation. Early on, you probably might have remembered, there were some studies that were that pulled back after they were found to be false, that some vaccines caused autism. Those were found to be completely false. But putting the genie back in the bottle in that discussion has been over the last 50 years and is still ongoing. So once that gets out there, people get concerned about long-term effects because of that one false study planting that seed. But over time, we have not seen that vaccinations of all comers leading to long-term chronic conditions. There may be 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million. It's hard to figure out. The reason this is hard is in the background of all of this over time is these diseases occur anyway. So if you get a chronic condition from something in 5 years and you say, oh, it's because I got the vaccine. Well, it could have also been because you're 5 years older, you have diabetes, you have high blood pressure. It's very confounding, which is why you need large data sets to figure that out. But be that as it may, we know right now that the risk-benefit profile for humans is that being vaccinated is much safer than being unvaccinated.
Understood. I guess, Dr. Diaz, really my last question for you here is, when you're dealing with patients, how often are you having to have the discussion with somebody who is vaccine hesitant, and what are you saying to them?
So the vaccine hesitancy question comes up all the time.
Like on a daily basis?
Pretty much. And I would say that the best way to approach that is to have an open discussion. People need to be heard. I think that people have obviously the right to their opinions and to be dealt with in a professional and compassionate fashion so that we hear this out. I also tell people, depending on what they tell me, I know I'm not going to change your mind, but here's what we know. I hear what you're saying. Think about it. And in primary care, if someone is using tobacco products, the time they come to us and say, I'm ready to quit, it takes 7 visits with them over time before that discussion, that initial discussion of I'm ready to do something becomes an action plan, just because that behavioral changes take a long time. And that's very akin to the vaccine hesitancy piece. It's not about, I think, people being polarized, although it comes out that way because of the way the discussion is going on nationally. It really is people's belief, and you need to understand it and support them. And maybe over time, there will be a different way to do it. It really, I'm going back to the whole national communication problem. By not having a single message, by not being aligned, by not agreeing that this is the best way forward and doing it in a thoughtful way, we've allowed factions of people to glom on to things that resonate with them. And we need to just be patient and do the best we can to let them know that the way forward, we believe from the medical community, is to be vaccinated. And hopefully at some point that might resonate with you.
Dr. Diaz, you've been incredibly generous with your time, and I got to ask you a ton of questions. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think I should have, or anything that you feel like we've left out at this point?
The only thing I would say on the vaccination front is the COVID-19 host is us humans. And when the variants emerge, they emerge because they're able to get into us and change a bit before they get propagated to elsewhere to other humans. The vaccines help break that cycle. So when you see the different variants coming out of the UK now, the new ones, or variants that have popped up all over the world, one of the ways to mitigate that, well, the best way to mitigate that is if we take away their ability to come into us and have time to do that, then the variant cycle gets broken. And the ability for it to be more virulent or really outside of what the alpha virus was, the alpha variant was, it helps us really stop. So I know that the vaccination is a personal decision, it protects you, but also the vaccination protect all of us because we're breaking the cycle of the virus being able to do its variant dance. And so that's the last thing I would say, is that it really is both a personal and a public health discussion, obviously. And it's not just because if we all get vaccinated, we get less sick. It also breaks a cycle of it transforming itself, causing these waves that we're seeing that are ongoing.
Awesome. Look, Dr. Diaz, I kind of hate to meet people for the first time with a mask on, so this is what I look like without a mask. Hi. I really appreciate you making the time to talk to us about this. And, you know, I'd love to stay in touch if there's more stuff that comes up that you feel like, hey, I'm hearing this, you know, claim a lot from my patients, or I'm seeing this claim online. I would love to stay in touch to make sure that we're helping you guys address those claims as they come up, because look, I need social media for my job, but if I didn't, I don't think I would use it because it's so brutal.
Well, I want to thank you for asking me to do this. You know, reached out to MaineGeneral. It's important that we're all trying to help communicate better.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't talk too fast.
No, you were great. You're a rock star. No, you're a rock star. You made my life easy.
Oh, good. Happy to stay in touch.
Yeah,
and Joy McKenna has all my info. I'm happy if she shares it with you. I'll let her know.
Okay, cool.
And keep up the great work.
Awesome. I'd love that. Hey, I'm going to stop the recording for now.